All right, we see
Yes,
you now.
we got you.
I think you're in New York, yeah?
Okay, yes, I'm in New York.
Have
All right,
you?
just
Yeah. Have you been following? So this is an election night, but we've been talking to guests, so we have no clue what's going on. Have you been following what's going on?
Well, the polls are just closing now. I mean, everybody's been around the world has been asking me, who's winning? Who's winning? We don't know who's winning yet. They've been saying for the last several months that, we're not going to know until they count all the mail-in votes and they count all the this and they count all the that. They've got truckloads of votes sitting in some warehouse somewhere in like New Jersey, and they're going to wait to bust those in until the last minute when they need to get whoever they need to have actually win this election. I mean, although I shouldn't say that because mail-in voting is no more fraudulent than electronic voting machine voting, which is one of the most fraudulent methods of voting in existence. So, I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But no, there's no definitive results yet, and to expect them right now is a bit unrealistic.
No, all right, fair enough. But I'm watching a Dutch. So I'm in the Netherlands, in Europe. I'm watching a Dutch news feed, and they say, "Well, Trump is ahead in Florida." Well, that's for whatever that's worth. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen any definitive results here or there, but
we're not going to be that kind of a broadcast. Now on the on the mail-in vote and the voting computers, both would be subpar. I like voting, with pen and with just analog, but mail-in voting. I'm surprised that it's being used so massively in the United States because is the question being raised that when you mail in vote, that you're not necessarily alone, so you're not necessarily uninfluenced. That might be a big disadvantage.
Well, yeah, there's this whole thing called ballot harvesting where there's literally people from both parties that go around door to door, basically intimidating people into saying, well, hey, you haven't filled out your ballot yet. Gee, sure would be a shame if anything happened to your car or your dog or your house or you. Or, I mean, I'm that's obviously a cartoonish exaggeration of ballot harvesting, but this does happen and it is a problem. And the idea that, I mean, yeah, like you said, that they're not necessarily alone. It could be somebody holding your hand or somebody filling out the ballot for you, as is exactly. Many cases. There have been all these cases popping up of like dead people voting and stuff, and it's like, okay, so obviously that person didn't vote. Who did?
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, to get your thoughts a bit, I think there's been a running theme with a lot of our guests and even some of us hosts when we're discussing Biden or Trump, right? And a lot of us think that there won't be too much of a difference. It's more like Coke and Pepsi. Some people think that Biden will accelerate the crash of the American empire, and Trump maybe will buy us some time. I mean, what are your thoughts on the dynamics of the whole Biden and Trump and what's going on?
Well, I think that Biden has said he wants to put the entire country under a lockdown. Well, basically, he said he wants to do what the scientists want to do. And of course, what the scientists, quote unquote, want to do has nothing to do with science. If you're looking at somebody like Fauci, he's been wrong about every major so-called epidemic in his entire career. He's got the blood of thousands of people on his hands just from the AIDS epidemic alone, when he blocked medications that would have saved lives in favor of medications that actually killed people, like AZT. And so it's like, that's definitely a big problem. I don't think that there's that much of a difference. As you said, it's Coke and Pepsi in terms of actual policy that affects, foreign policy, things like that. We're going to get more war no matter who it is. Trump, for all his rhetoric about ending the wars in the Middle East, actually bombed more civilians than even Obama. And that's a lot of civilians dying at the hands of U.S. taxpayer paid bombs. But as far as domestic policy goes, I think for those of us who are interested in remaining outside of a nationwide lockdown, as much as I am loath to say anything in favor of Donald Trump, like it is slightly more rosy outlook there, but only slightly. Of course, he could do an about face, because you get the feeling that Trump is just playing a role at any rate. And he's made it clear, even during the first part of the pandemic, that this was all decisions being made far above his pay grade. Like he didn't want to do any sort of federal lockdown, but then he made some comment about how, we didn't want to do this, but they said we had to. And who's they? And he's always kind of teased just this little hint of, okay, well, I'm not the one making the decisions here, so don't blame me. And that's why I've said before in some of my articles for RT that I don't think that either of them really wanted to win this particular election, because they know that whatever happens, they're going to be saddled with the fall of the empire. And while it's entirely possible they could keep the ball rolling, it's getting a bit ridiculous if you're minting trillions of dollars at a time at every single every time Congress convenes. Oh, we need another multi-trillion-dollar bailout because you're deliberately smothering the economy with a pillow. And it's a little bit of a certainty almost that something is going to have to give. And I don't know exactly what that will be or when, but I do know that they have all kinds of fun unrest in store for if things don't go the way they want. And I can't be too optimistic about either outcome, but I would rather not live under nationwide lockdown. So, that's just my way of looking at things.
Well, the difference is, so this is from Europe. I'm in the Netherlands. So we have a lot of small nations now. And in Austria we have a lockdown. In Spain, you're not allowed out without your face mask. And just today, outside even.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's in the United States, but that's idiot. But our prime minister went out in his press conference just this evening, like a couple of hours ago, saying, "Well, you're not allowed out with more than 2 people and your kid. So we can't. Me and my wife and our boy, we can't be on the street if he has his way." And he's talking curfew. So apparently this virus is being blocked by a curfew in his imagination.
That's exactly it. They want us to completely just ditch our common sense. Any sort of like reasonable reaction to something like that, such as, well, yeah, the virus has a bedtime. Does the virus not, the virus sees this many people and it says, ooh, yummy. And then it sees this many people and says, oh, I'm going to stay away. Nobody actually thinks like that. And nobody thinks the virus thinks like that, but they don't want you to react like that. So it's just been a constant chipping away at your common sense and constant chipping and chipping and chipping away, so that when they finally roll out whatever the big reveal is, and it does present a bit of interpretation that you don't, whatever is going on now is going to be looking like child's play when they finally deliver the real deal here. Because I do think that this because of the low death rate in general of the novel coronavirus, that this is a dress rehearsal for whatever the final thing is going to be. This is just making sure they have all their ducks in a row. There was that World Health Organization document that asked all signatories to have conducted, I believe it was 2 drills using the entire health emergency service. I'm not remembering the phrasing exactly, but there was a document that was put out in, I think, 2018 that I can send it to you guys to post it in the show notes, because I think everybody should read this. It's very interesting, especially in light of what's going on now in terms of just like, oh, you have to conduct a drill using the entire emergency system by September 2020 was the deadline. And they don't want you to react like a normal human being would react. They want to alienate you not only from the planet, and not only from your species, not only from your civilization, your family, your friend group, but from yourself. They want you not to actually behave according to a normal human instinct of self-preservation, of just a normal reaction. So they try to say, oh, these are things that spread the virus. There's the New York Times editorial board actually put out something a few days back saying that we can't celebrate the holidays as usual, because we know that singing, laughing, and smiling, well, no, it wasn't smiling, but it was singing, laughing, and celebrating, something like that, spreads the virus. And not like, oh, crying or shouting, but it was all these like happy things that we know that spreads the virus, so we can't see our families for the holidays.
Yeah, same thing here. It's global, it's universal. But do you think it's a dress rehearsal for another virus or a bigger virus, or it's a dress rehearsal for something else?
It could be both. Bill Gates has said that this is, they're going to listen to us next time. He's always talking about pandemic 2.0, and he's made a bunch of comments about a bioterror attack. So it's entirely possible that they might combine 2 of their favorite things and have like a false flag bioterror attack. But it could also be lockdowns for another reason. I've heard this talk of climate lockdowns. I think that sounds a bit far-fetched, but then again, we would have thought that this sounds far-fetched back, 2 years ago. So, I mean, now that they've gotten what they wanted and they realize there's absolutely no opposition, so the sky's the limit.
This was actually almost literally a statement by our government saying, well, one way to get our climate goals is to continue this lockdown.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's insane. That is so insane. But I mean, they got what they wanted the first time. So what's going to stop them from taking it to the most absurd lengths they can possibly go?
Yeah, and the document you mentioned, that was 2019, I think, September 2019, and it was like this new institution that was formed between WHO, UN, Fauci was on the board, someone from the Gates Foundation, and yeah, as you said, that by September 2020, so that was 2 months ago, they should have run. Like the second part of their simulation. And I mean, there's just so many things. We had that 2010 Rockefeller lockstep report.
Yeah.
And then last year, there were half a dozen coronavirus influenza bioterror simulations. Crimson Contagion, Urban Outbreak, the one in Wuhan in September where the Chinese specifically were running.
Yeah, Event 201, of course, Event 201. So, yeah, I mean, what was the name of that new organization? That was the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. Was that what it's called?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and so now there's all this talk about dark winter, and I after Biden mentioned it recently in the debate, I did a quick search and I found the mayor of London also used the term dark winter. The Minnesota governor used dark winter.
Oh my God!
From another state, and so it's now become some kind of slogan, dark winter.
Yes, as soon as he said that during the debate, I went on Twitter and it was just like, Biden just said dark winter, we're all doomed. It's just like, I mean, when they start throwing that term around, it's like, obviously, I mean, some people know what it means, other people don't, but when it becomes a meme, it's like build back better is suddenly on everybody's lips. And it's like, okay, so you guys all had a meeting beforehand and decided this was what you were going to say. It's a little bit disingenuous of them, let's say.
And I guess another question I was going to ask you, I think you may have covered this sometimes in your writing. Perhaps, there's this talk of foreign interference in U.S. politics, and I'm not specifically talking about Russiagate, but you can comment on that. But, we have all these lobby groups as well, the Saudi lobby, the Israeli lobby, Chinese economic interests, Silicon Valley, as well as the good old military-industrial complex and Wall Street. So it kind of goes back to what we were saying before that, it'll be worse, definitely, as you said, with Biden. I wouldn't want to be in a lockdown. And it's interesting to see how people who otherwise wouldn't vote for Trump, maybe people from the progressive or left side, are now kind of like saying, well, it's the least worst option to go with Trump. But, if Trump wins, will that make some of these other lobby groups happy?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the Israeli lobby has been pretty heavily invested in the Trump campaign. I mean, there's a right and a left wing to the Israeli lobby, just like there's a right and a left wing to the U.S. politics. But the right wing of Israeli politics is pretty heavily invested in Donald Trump. Sheldon Adelson has given him millions and millions of dollars, and in this campaign as well as in the last one. And of course, legendarily, Paul Singer, the vulture capitalist who tried to steal Twitter earlier this year, while originally commissioning the Fusion GPS study that became Russiagate, ended up actually donating to Trump. And then this year, again, he's been a backer of Trump. So yeah, the Israeli lobby, at least that half of it, will be perfectly happy to have Trump in office again because they think they can squeeze a war with Iran out of him. And whether or not that happens, I mean, I think that would be ideal for the ones that want the bioterror attack. They would probably stage one and blame it on Iran, and then they could have their war. But it's also possible that Israeli politics is in its own death spiral. So given where the corner that Bibi is backing himself into, he could just attack Iran and then to try to drive the U.S. into war because what has he got to lose? It's the whole Samson option thing. So while I don't think he's quite in that level yet, the Israelis are not happy with being locked down either. So it's entirely possible that they might have bigger problems on their hands right now than a few U.S. activists who happen to be not really interested in giving their tax dollars to a war criminal state, or at least a war criminal state they don't live in.
what are some other issues? I mean, we've covered a lot of different topics. So election, some of the lobby groups, COVID-1984. What are some other issues that you recurrently focus on that are on your mind lately?
Well, I mean, definitely the coronavirus thing is very much in the forefront because I live in New York City and we've completely just destroyed everything that made this place special. And I think that it's getting into people's identities and it's changing who they are as a person or psychologically, their entire character. Because if you have lived your entire life working up to be something like, say, an artist or a musician or anything along those lines, or an actor. I mean, in New York had this huge theater industry and this huge music industry. And I hesitate to even use the word industry because that implies some sort of like faceless capitalist thing. And it wasn't really that. It was that these were genuinely like valuable organizations that produced good art that a lot of people came here to see. And now we don't have that anymore. Now we're literally explicitly by executive order forbidden to have that by a wannabe totalitarian, call him like the mini primate Mussolini, but that's kind of an insult to Mussolini because, you know, Cuomo is just so, he's such a repulsive character. And it's just that he has put out an executive order in August that forbids anyone from staging musical or theatrical performances and charging admissions for them or having people pay for them ahead of time. So you can't know that if you go to a place and there's going to be music going on, you can't know about it beforehand and you can't pay for it beforehand. And it's just the most obviously inside out thing ever. And the whole idea is to asset strip what's left of New York City, is to take the properties of the restaurants, take the properties of the theaters. And sure enough, the real estate valuations for New York have plummeted way into the bottom, into the basement. And I believe it is pretty much the same across the nation to a greater or lesser extent. I think probably more so in democratic states where we've had these heavy lockdowns or we've had these shutdowns that have put entire industries out on the street. It's a giant asset stripping scheme. And just as the giant sucking sound that Ross Perot talked about NAFTA pushing across the border, now we're getting a giant sucking sound going upwards to the private equity executives. That Cuomo literally has these private equity executives, these, again, vulture capitalists on the board of the committee tasked with putting New York back together again after he broke it. And so the idea that you have these people who are profiting off companies being broken shells, husks of their former selves, and you have these companies tasked with putting together it's the biggest conflict of interest you can possibly imagine. And this is, I believe that this is going on to some extent across the ocean in England too, but I don't know enough of the details about, I know that they're trying to privatize the NHS and they've been trying to do that for a long time, but I think that they're definitely finding a way to work that in as far as forbidding practices to carry out quote unquote non-essential procedures. And then you basically end up bankrupting the practices and it becomes, oh, well, look, they have no money. Well, I guess we'll just have to sell it off. And that was how they were able to get the hospitals in the US to agree to basically commit what would amount to war crimes if we were in a declared war, as far as just putting infected patients in wards with the elderly and frail and having them infect everybody and basically kill everybody, and then having preemptively written exemptions into the law that would prevent them from being put in jail for these crimes. The idea that this wasn't pre-planned, or at least in part that there was some kind of game plan, is completely absurd. And the fact that there are still people trying to argue that, it's very telling that like Twitter and everybody's trending topics, and they now no longer allow topics to trend organically. It can only trend if there's a mainstream news story associated with it. And that, it's very unfortunate that what could have been a tool of liberation for the people has become such a tool of mental control. It's become a definite cult. I kind of diverged from where I was starting with that, but in terms of people's personalities, they've had their reason for existing, the thing that they had always been, their purpose as an artist or a musician or something, and now they can be a rule follower, and they can be a really good rule follower, and that's what they're going to be now, because they realize that there's no future for them in this previous thing, and rather than fight back and actually stand up for themselves and actually stand up for humanity, even, it's okay. Well, I'm going to be a rule follower. I'm going to rat out my neighbor, and unfortunately, this is where you get the Karens, the Stasi, the Corona Stasi, or whatever. There's a whole bunch of terms for them, but I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about that lately, about how community policing is the new thing, and how
I saw
terrifying.
a new thing pop up in the Netherlands just this evening. So our mainstream media is all on Team Biden. So we're all for Democrats. Now the alternative channels would be just like mine, of a more open opinion. Let's see who has the better ideas or what have you. But then there was this alternative channel that was, and I'm assuming they were paid. That was also plugging. They were just like mainstream media doing their Biden routine, but under the guise of being an alternative citizen journalism channel. So that was new that I saw that. And a friend of mine was a guest there. I saw her on that channel being interviewed, and she was asked, "Oh, you're favoring Trump? Well, would you be our guest?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, I'll be on TV." But she was set up. I saw her being set up on a citizen journalistic channel. So that was new for me to see that here in the Netherlands.
We have a lot of that here. There's a huge amount of formerly alternative media personalities who have just completely bought into the whole Corona thing and become complete fearmongers. And oh, how dare these people go around without masks on outdoors? That they must hate their fellow man, and that they must be secretly Trump supporters or white supremacists. There's been this whole like weird, nonsensical thing trying to conflate people who don't want to be wearing a mask outside because it serves no purpose other than to basically mark you as a member of the cult of Corona, and white supremacy. It doesn't. I mean, I see no logical link between the two, but here we don't need logic anymore. Logic is, after all, spreads the coronavirus.
Exactly. And so Roger, myself, were discussing before we started if and which guest interview would get us on the penalty bench in YouTube again.
It's me.
Well, you would think that, but I don't know. Roger, what would you place your bets already or not on that one?
Well, we're still streaming, so
maybe maybe sit it out first. But the thing is, it's arbitrary. So I'm mentioning this because you mentioned Twitter just now. We've had a couple of years now of shadow banning, and you don't know how you're being banned, but currently it's just blatant out in the open. You'll just get deleted. Or you create your tweets and your tweets get deleted. Or you're the only one seeing your own timeline. And if you ask a friend, they say, "No, I don't see your tweets." So it's way out in the open.
Yeah, these last couple of days I've been, sometimes I'll try to tweet something and then it'll say, "Oh, we're sorry, there's been an error. Try again." And it's like, wait a second, what? And you keep clicking and nothing happens. And you go do something else and you come back an hour and it happens and it's fine. It's the whole idea of learned helplessness. It's like if you're a mouse in a cage and you're trying to get to the food bowl, but the floor is electrocuted. And as you get closer to the food bowl, sometimes there'll be a shock and sometimes there won't. But eventually you just expect the shock and you just decide, you know what, I don't need this food right now.
I'm not that hungry. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, what you go.
Just gonna say, a few days ago, there was that stuff that came out with Mr. Biden's son, and I one of the sources that I found was from Gateway Pundit, and they published it on their website, but I noticed they hadn't tweeted anything about it. It was on their website, and I, being the little kid who sees the electric outlet, and he probably knows what's going to happen if he sticks his finger in an electric outlet, but does it anyways, and so I decided to tweet that stuff from on Twitter, and immediately, not like a millisecond later, it says you're locked out of your Twitter for 12 hours. And then I had to wait till the next morning to remove the tweet and be unlocked and be warned that, if you do this again, you're going to be permanently terminated from Twitter. So,
oh my God. Yeah. The reaction to that story was just over the top. I mean, talk about the cover up being worse than the crime. It's like, okay, so I think they really screwed the pooch with that one because it just made it so obvious. They got sued by the Republican National Committee for that. Twitter did for making an in-kind contribution to the Biden campaign, just just by blocking anybody who tried to share that story. And I think they realized they went a little too far because they retracted at least a little bit of it. Now it just shows up with like a thought babysitting warning where, are you sure you want to share that story? I'm afraid we can't let you share that story. Are you really, really, really sure? And then they eventually let you share it, but you can't just retweet. That would be wrong. The whole block on retweets is so ridiculous, but
I guess one of my last questions goes back to what you were saying about New York. And I know Enrico's, when he interviewed me for his podcast a month or two ago, I was saying the same thing, that the BLM and Antifa are the useful idiots. And we've seen evidence now that they've been receiving financing from the oligarchs, right? Soros, Warren Buffett, and others, probably big tech folk, Amazon and all these people. And their goal is to run amok in the cities, burn them down, have the residents flee, the property prices decline, and the same financiers buy it up for pennies on the dollar, and then they build their new smart cities or whatever. That's happening here. They're not burning down the city where I am here in Mexico, but I found the governor's plans where he's actually being financed by Rockefeller, because we're a resilient city, and resilient cities receive, it's in the report, they receive exclusively funds from Rockefeller Foundation and World Bank. And they need to use those funds to create a cashless city, build pre-crime. It actually mentions pre-crime, have their police move into pre-crime, create this, smart surveillance grid. So that's kind of happening. But do you think New York will recover? So I've seen a lot of prominent people tweet that, New York is finished. What are your thoughts there?
I don't think New York will recover. No, I mean, they've made sure that it won't. They've shut down the subways between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock a.m., which, if you're supposed to be the city that never sleeps and you rely on nightlife for a good portion of your people's entertainment, one of the whole reasons people live here is because there's stuff to do, and you legally prohibit people from doing those things. And then, as you mentioned, I would love to see the Mexican version of the Rockefeller document, because I know New York has all kinds of partnerships with Israeli tech startups. Cuomo, there's at least two that I know of that whose names of course I can never remember when I need to. But at any rate, there's one where they've signed an agreement with Cuomo that 5 cities, including New York, will be these test labs for basically Israeli smart cities. And then there's another Israeli tech incubator that is in part going to be part of New York. And as you say, I don't know if they're going to burn the entire thing down, but they definitely need to retrofit it. And that's what helps with getting everybody out of the office buildings. Then they can get their people in, retrofit it to monitor every single drop of water used, every single electron that goes through the wires, and to be able to cut them off when the people that you don't like are using them. Of course, that's a big part of it. But yeah, the surveillance system, I mean, that's what I don't want to say the word that the 5th generation wireless, the letter and the number you're not supposed to say in sequence without getting kicked off YouTube. That is more for surveillance than for anything else. It's you can't have 24/7, 365 surveillance of every single human being on the planet without that kind of bandwidth. And given our current infrastructure, we cannot do that. So once they have that, then it will be entirely possible to do the pre-crime stuff and to basically be able to know your next move better than you know it yourself. And that's, I think that really needs to be something that people focus on more than everybody's attention is so divided right now and into so many things, including a lot of dead ends and red herrings. And I think people really need to if you're going to make your whole work about something, then make sure that you're actually working towards something that really exists. Don't be trusting the plan or whatever. I mean, the fact that there are still people out there trusting the plan, it's like, guys, I know you want something to be true, but you can't will that into existence. You cannot make a silk purse out of the political sow's ear. And I think that what they're doing in the cities right now, New York is not coming back. And New York has been its back has been broken. Its people have been completely subjugated into these spineless. It's funny. There's the aquarium down here where I live out by Coney Island is no longer open, but they have these signs out there from when it used to be. And one of the signs says, "No spine, no problem. Come see our invertebrate exhibit." But I just find it funny every time I see that, because that really describes New Yorkers now to a T. No spine, fine. No problem indeed.
Let me just read a few comments from viewers who are listening now. Someone says New York City will eventually recover, but as a shell of what it was, will just be a gated corporate island. And another, thanks for this comment, guys. All your guests this evening have been fantastic. All right, so we know we're doing good. So any final thought to leave us with, Helen?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't consider it becoming a gated corporate community to be recovery at all. I would consider that to be, a calcification of its graveyard status. But yeah, I suppose economically it could be considered recovery, or a holding pen for the human cattle or something like that. I don't think we need holding pens for human cattle. I think we need humans to stand up and stop being cattle. But
exactly. Okay.
Where's the best place people can follow you? I know your Twitter feed is a great resource. You've got your website as well. Where should people go?
Yeah, helenofdestroy.com. My website is, you can find basically everything. All my social media accounts are linked on there. If for some reason my website should go down, you can always find me on Twitter, Velocirapture23, VELOCIRAPTURE 23. When I signed up with that name, I never thought I was going to have to be spelling it, but it's a story of my life. But yeah, and I also write for RT.com. You can search my name on there, Helen Buyniski, and my articles will come up.
So you're a Russian agent? Just kidding.
Oh yeah, totally.
And don't say that you can always find you on Twitter, because there may be one day where we might.
That's true. You can always find me somewhere on the internet, but you never know where I will be.
Well, that's hopeful at least. That he can keep the internet. All right. Fun talking to you. Thank you.
Nice talking to you guys as well. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make.
You think I'm joking? Predator drones. You will never see it coming.
Laat staan dat ik kan ingaan over vuur.